Welcome, welcome. We got another episode of The Weird Way here today, and I'm excited again. I think I'm always excited, and I probably say that same thing every fucking time. But the reason I'm excited today, I've got Kristian Stefan Martin with me today. He is a leadership coach, a dance teacher, and he's someone I'm really excited to jam with because he's been my coach in the past. He's taught me a lot of wisdom, and on Friday I was at one of his workshops, and it was a leadership training where we learnt through dance. And for me, this was so potent and powerful because it reflected a lot of the principles I work with. And if you're familiar with Hermetic principles, so within, so without, so above, so below, and the micro and the macrocosm, this was like a microcosm of leadership through the perspective of dance. And this was just such a beautiful embodied way to do it. And so I'm excited to jam with you today, brother. Excited to see what we got. You're just sharing before that you're like, let's just fucking do this, jump on, not have too much of a pre-podcast conversation. And I appreciate that, man. So welcome.
Thank you, bro. Yeah, man. It's nice to look you in the eyes, and you know, I've done podcasts online, done them in person, and just nothing replaces in person, bro. And actually listened to the episode with Cam Fraser, and that made me even more excited to come on. Like you're a good podcast host, bro. And I was like, man, Dean's landed in a spot here, bro. Yeah. So how are you feeling with it?
Man, I am very comfortable in this space. I think I've said this on this podcast. This was 3 years in the making. I started listening to podcasts about 5 years ago, 2 years. The first year I started listening to podcasts, Spotify told me I had 30 days collective listening to them, total runtime.
What do you mean by that?
So 30 times 24 hours.
Yeah.
So that's how long I listened to podcasts that year.
Right.
And when I reflected on that and reflected on this journey of actually being here today, it feels very comfortable. And it's like, oh, you know, when you find a little piece of your soul or something that just feels exactly right and you're meant to be.
Yeah.
And for you, I'm curious if that felt like dance when you discovered it, but just something that fits so right. And it's like, ooh, I'm meant to be here.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. I do feel that with dance. Like, I got questions for you, bro. What have you been learning about yourself or about the people or just life through the podcast?
Mm-hmm. For me, it's this humbling experience that I'm always a student. And this is something which makes me so excited for this podcast because I'm having conversation with people that inspire me. And I know I don't know it all. This is a big lesson for me because I love to know things. I love to be the smart guy in the room who has all this experience, all this knowledge. And it's one of my deepest joys when I can be in the room with someone and I am a humble beginner where I don't know anything. This was my experience on Friday when I was dancing with you. I am not a structured dancer or like a classical dancer. Give me an ecstatic dance and I can dance real fun. But learning the moves, I'm a humble beginner. And they're the experiences where it's like, oh, life has so much more to offer me. And so the people that have come on, each one feels like they've come from a very wide and diverse background, even with yourself here today. And for me, that excites me because I love when I meet someone who's unique, when they are who they are. They're not trying to fit into a little box. And I'm like, oh, you can be like Cam Fraser, a men's lead and sex coach. You can be like Jessica Ann, who's more into the occult magic. Like you can be Josh Lovegrove, who's like artist and killing it as a musician. But the important thing is for you to be you. And that's when you offer the most to this world. And so that for me is like, oh, how can I be more of myself? And this podcast is a way for that.
Very cool, bro.
I really like what you did here, man. Returning and changing the questions around. I haven't had that yet, so I appreciate that.
I think not that they were particularly profound questions, but I've always thought question asking is one of my best attributes. And sometimes it's just simply I have the courage to ask. I was I've always been encouraged to ask questions, and then like I would ask a good question and someone would be like, it's a good question, kind of sort of fed that. But I think asking questions is just fucking cool.
Yeah.
It's cool, bro. It's cool to ask questions like, why is that way? What if it, it's what I do most of my time.
I love this because for me, curiosity
Yeah.
is one of my highest values, like to be curious about anything, and not to say the word of just, curious. That can annoy me when people just say that and that's the sentence, but to be curious about someone and to really act as curious and to go be like, oh, there's a new person. There's someone I don't know. They must have a whole world inside of them. And, when I come at that, or there's a new lesson for me here and I can begin to learn that there's so much of the world that opens.
Yeah.
And it sounds like this has always been a part of your story. Or have you learnt to be more curious along the way?
No, I think I've always been pretty curious. As you said that, I was like, oh man, sometimes I don't even care who. if I don't know what it is, but if I have interest in the person, then I'm very curious. Yeah. But some people, because when you were speaking, I was thinking like, what I'm most curious right now is why did these people paint the woodshed black? That's so. For anyone who can't see the place that we're at, it's in the kind of the countryside a little bit, and there's a woodshed, and it's a very dark charcoal black. And I look at that and I think, well, that decision, there's an energy in that, like if they painted that white, that would have a different energy. It's like, why did they decide to do that? Or like, I don't know. Shit like that fascinates me, bro. And like if I'm interested in somebody, I'm very curious. That's why, like, when I heard your podcast, I was like, man, like you feel like you're in your spot, it's very cool. But to speak about your question, I think I've always been curious. I think my mum, I'm an only child, and I grew up mostly with my mum, and she definitely nurtured that in me. I think I was born with it, but we'd just have conversations, like as a young kid, she'd be like, what do you think homeless people do when it rains? She asked me that at like 5 years old and shit like that. I was like, oh, fuck, good question, Mum.
That's a big question for a 5-year-old.
Yeah, bro. Yeah.
For me, this really begs the question, and something I've thought about a lot, and I'm still answering within myself, the question of nature versus nurture.
Yeah.
And, when I look back on my own life and I have theories around how trauma can offer us our greatest gifts. For me, like you're saying that I've kind of found my spot here in this podcast. For me, I was in speech therapy for the first couple years of my life when I was young, when I was learning how to talk, and there's been so much shame around my voice. And so when you say that, it's like, oh, there's an acknowledgement of the work I've done, but also I reflect and I'm like, did I have that stutter because I knew I was meant to speak? And my soul asking me to do that, and knowing I needed to learn the skills to be able to be here today, going through the trials and tribulations. And like for me, I still wonder how much of that was because of the experience I had. It allowed me to have a way with words, to be curious about words and how I articulate. And how much of that was my nature of this is just what I was meant to do. So I know you've been in the coaching space for many years, and I'm wondering if you've seen like this pattern of nature versus nurture, or you've had your own thoughts about it as well.
Yeah. Froth that question. It's also cool that you, in your early years, you were in speech therapy, and now you're doing a podcast, which is about your voice.
Yeah.
It's very cool. Nature versus nurture. My perspective is, I guess I'd share it in a metaphor or an analogy. I never know which is which. I should actually, and I always say this too. Do you know the difference?
No.
Okay.
They're very similar to me. If you're listening and please send that to either of us.
Yeah. So I believe basically like if we're born, and I believe that we are born with a nature, of some kind, almost like a blueprint for like a tree. A tree is a seed at the start, and there's a blueprint for what it's going to become. And given the right conditions, it will. So I feel that we're born with kind of here's a bit of the blueprint. I don't think it's like concrete, but yeah, here's the skeleton of like what's natural to us, what's natural to us, what's not natural to us, sorry, what we might gravitate towards, the ways that we're going to end up processing the world and seeing the world, and yeah, just who we are. And then I feel like the world just then gives us layers, basically. I really imagine, the timeline of aging from 0 to whenever, and people are just handing you layers, as soon as you're born, maybe not now with, stuff around non-binary and things like that, but, cliche, like it's a boy, hand them a blue onesie. If it's a girl, hand them a pink onesie. It's like from that moment, other people, external factors are handing us things to put on and to wear. Then we go to school, again, if you're a boy, you're going to probably be pushed into doing something physical, some sports and stuff like that. If you do art, at least in Australia right now, I'd say still, if you do art, well then you're gay. You like, so you cop another message, or you get, stewarded somewhere else, and then you go to you're in high school, you're in college, people are telling you, oh, you should study medicine, or you should wear these clothes, you should drink this beer, whatever it may be. And if you just, the way I picture it, it's like a marathon. It's like if you're in the center of the marathon course, and then there's the spectators lining the streets. Imagine if you're just walking and that's your life timeline, and every single person is like shouting out or yelling like, Dean, put this on, bro, and you're cool. And then someone else, you put that on because you're like, fuck, I want to be cool. I want to be approved. And then the next person is like, oh, you poofed her. Like, why are you wearing that, Dean? And so all of a sudden there's just people like throwing shit, holding shit, saying like, you got to do this thing. Yeah. And for me, that's like kind of that's a good movie style story of what I see is that we do come in with this nature, and then it can either get really encouraged and supported, or it might get completely suffocated by all these layers that we're wearing. And if you really imagine that, like if you imagine you've got 40 t-shirts on because each one of them you thought was going to get you approval, I couldn't even imagine wearing 3 t-shirts right now, bro. Like I would not be able to move as much, literally. I'd be hot, I would be uncomfortable, but like, so that's what's happening on like the spiritual energy level, personality level, psychology level, behavioral level. They can't move, they're not themselves, they're not free, stuff like that. So I don't know if that story made sense, but that's kind of, I think, a good way to look at it. And then so I believe largely life is a process of unlearning and unconditioning.
Yeah. And I see that so deeply, and that's a big thing of this podcast here, of how we can actually take them layers off and actually reveal what's beneath, because, hey, maybe we don't want any shirts on and I'd rather be topless and just showing my tits, and that's part of this journey we go on. And I know for me, I reflect on who I had to be in life. I had to be the good boy. I had to be the people pleaser. Well, I didn't have to be. I chose to be. And that's a big difference. I chose to be them people, but I didn't know another way. And I often see that. And you mentioned something that is big in Australian culture, which is that pressure because, oh, it's gay if you do that. And I'm not saying being gay is a bad thing. That's not true. But a lot of people can have that connotation here in Australia, especially when I was growing up. That was a factor. Yeah. It was like no one wanted to be that. And I completely disagree. It's not a bad thing. But as a kid, it's treated as a bad thing.
It's what we heard.
It's what we heard. And like you mentioned that, the more arty things were considered that. Yeah. And I'm curious on your own journey, because you're a dance teacher now, and that's considered more of an artistic expression. Was there a journey with that where it was like, oh, can I step into this dance, or an inner conflict, or had you already been past that stage?
Yeah, well, I stepped into Latin dancing when I was early 20s. So yeah, I don't know how it would have, and I was completely comfortable with that. Had I started earlier, I don't know. And it's street Latin, which is very different to ballroom Latin. Yeah, but like I loved hip hop and R&B growing up, but I lived in country Victoria. I don't know if we even had those things available to us, but I have wondered, like, would I have done them? Would I have not done them? Because I remember doing aerobics, actually. Like I was too young to join the gym. You can join the gym when you're 16. And I was 14 and a pretty good athlete. And they were like, oh, we can do like an aerobics kind of class for you. And it was mostly girls, you know, the girls that I went to high school with. And I do remember like there was, I don't think I got called gay, but I do remember there was something about me doing that, which was like just not cool, or it was a girl thing to do, which is just fucking wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so in that you chose to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there was still that pressure of, oh, maybe I should be someone else.
Yeah. A little bit of that. Yeah. Not a massive thing, but yeah, it was a thing. Yeah.
And like I can reflect on similar moments in my own life. So I followed my brother through a lot of my schooling because that seemed safe. That seemed like the masculine thing to do. And it made me probably disregard a lot of my own interests in my life because I seen that was safe. I saw that that was okay to do. And I resisted who I actually was. So that meant, you know, not doing the things like art, history that I was actually interested in, and doing more of the maths, the science, the analytical, the very right brain subjects. And it took me a long time, and it wasn't until when I was depressed that I actually refound art. And it was actually one of my saviors because it allowed me to connect to my emotionality. Because in it I learned, oh, I could express my pain. I could express that, and I didn't have the words for it at the time to be able to share that, but I could draw a picture. And I find this so interesting when we consider the disconnect that may occur for, you know, a lot of men, which is we're very analytical, we're very logical. And when I look at the statistics of men, we see that they're the ones that mostly suffer or that have the highest degree of suffering when it comes to mental health. And my perspective on this is it's actually that disconnect with a lot of these more artistic sides of ourselves. And I would call that the feminine. I would call that, you know, the feminine part of ourselves that we disconnect from. And that disconnect is actually hurting men.
Yeah, it's funny that you pushed yourself into those more analytical things and then experienced depression, and then art helped you out of that, which probably because you weren't doing art in the first place was probably part of why you got there, you know? Yeah. On the masculine and feminine stuff, this shit could be talked. I don't think there's conclusions on this, to be honest with you. There's so many things. I don't really even bother nowadays classifying things as feminine or masculine. But I do agree that the artistic side of men, well, that stream of expression is so repressed, and I actually think it's so foundational to us. Like I believe philosophy is art, and a lot of the great philosophers that we know of are men. And that requires going into your inner world or sitting in nature on your own. You know, nature could be considered a feminine thing. It's doing things that are not just, you know, you get up and you go to work and you do the thing and you construct the thing. It's time introspecting, thinking, feeling, expressing, and being with it all. So I do think that. I'm an advocate for poetry. I went through a big stage of writing poetry, and I think poetry is something that all men should do. Yeah.
Like when you're talking, I'm thinking of, you know, the warrior poet, the archetype of that, and I think of Marcus Aurelius, who was, you know, one of the greatest philosophers that I know and I consider, and, you know, a Roman emperor who was a warrior, but he had some of the most profound impact. words and way of speaking that I know of, and his words are still remembered to this day. And like, yeah, we could go into the thing of masculine, feminine, and that is that is a big conversation. And for me, it is more this, the inner world, I guess, is another way to talk to it, of a man actually going within himself, is what I mean by that feminine aspect, which I referred to earlier, of like, oh, what's alive within us? What is occurring within ourselves, rather than what's happening on the outside? Like, oh, that happened and I'm feeling this. Oh, that creating that awareness to know ourselves.
Yeah. So I'm a firm believer in where we create from is what we create more of. So if we create from a place of fear, we will only create more fear. And an example is that it just clicked for me. I don't know where the name Morpheus comes from in the Matrix. He's the main character, isn't he? I've never seen the Matrix.
He's the mentor to the main character.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I just put the words Morpheus and Morpheus together. I was like, oh, I wonder. So the fucking tangents in my brain, bro.
I enjoy tangents. That's why we're here, man.
Tangents are good. So yeah, just where you create from creates more of that same thing. So I like we haven't talked about, but at the start you mentioned I'm a coach, and a former client of mine is a lawyer in Southern California, and he has multiple multi-million-dollar businesses, and he's in his 50s. And he said to me one day, he was like, Kristian, I was rejected so much in college by girls that I said, I'm just going to make so much money, I'll never be rejected again. And he did. He made tons of money. But it was built on the energy and the emotion of, I don't want to be rejected. Like, I feel worthless, or I feel like a piece of shit, so I need this thing. And, no surprise at all, he came to me to talk to me about his relationship with his wife, and he wasn't feeling respected, and he wasn't feeling like, she really honored him as a man, which was really, of course, just mostly about him. But it's like, yeah, we can't outdo who we're being. Like, if you feel like you're unworthy, then, and you go out and try to do something to cover that up, it just actually doesn't work. They're doing what we do, and our beingness are on different planes of existence. And it's like, if you wanted apple juice, no matter how many liters of orange juice I gave you, it wouldn't satisfy your desire for apple juice. Like, you might be like, yeah, that's good, but it's not apple juice. It's not the same. So when it comes to you talking about men going inwards into their inner world, if we don't connect to what brings us alive, and we don't connect to our heart especially, and what literally brings life to your body and to your cells, if you don't create from that place, in my opinion, you're that is what you create. So it's like, if you're not alive inside and you're not creating from that, you will create something which is dead, so to speak. But if you are creating from aliveness, you will create something, a structure, a podcast, a book, a coaching course, which has life. And that life then gives other people life. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's just so fucking important for every single human. You've got to go within to tune in. And sure, you've got to do some shit. Like, you can sit, the counter to that is you could sit all fucking day and do nothing. Yeah. Because you're like, oh, I'm not alive yet. And so sometimes you have to go out and try shit. But if that's mostly the mode that you're creating from, is, you're not really connected to it, it doesn't do much for you internally, then it's no wonder it's not doing anything when you create it.
I love this. It reminds me of the fuck yes timeline. I've been talking to this with a few people lately, and it's the idea that if we say 90%, if something's a 90% and we say yes to it, we only ever get 90%. because that's all we're ever allowing. And if we don't say no to the 90% because we know we want the 100%, we're only ever going to have that. And this is sometimes the hardest thing of, oh, this feels almost it. And I know I've struggled with this in, different relationships and things where it's like, this is almost it. This is almost the thing that I truly want, but there's something missing. And in our hearts, we can often know that there's something missing. And I know for me, like when I was depressed and that, I didn't want to admit that. I didn't want to admit I was in pain, because I would then had to have a look at my life and be able and be willing to change it. And so it was easier to ignore that and just be like, no, everything's okay. I'll just ignore that 10%. Back then it was fucking probably 70%. But I'll ignore that 10% because that's kind of easier. But it will come for us. It will always come. And I find that over and over again.
Do you reckon... So I reckon there's a trap in that as well. What are you, like, always wanting like the 100% thing? Do you, in your experience or in your thoughts, do you think that's possible?
So the trap I see in that is saying no to something that could be the fuck yes without trying it. That for me is a fin. But it's not always going to feel like a full fuck yes. But in there are times where you're feeling full, it will. So for me, like when I think of business, that's a big aspect for me. There's times where I have to do things that I don't want to do.
Yeah.
They're not a full fuck yes, but the business, the vision, all of that is a full fuck yes for me. So the greater picture is a full fuck yes, and along the way there's little things that may not be a full fuck yes.
Yeah. I resonate with that because I definitely... At one point in my life, I definitely drank the Kool-Aid of like, oh, just follow your bliss and everything will be good. And I thought that would be it. And then I was like, fuck, I've got to learn things that I'm not so good at, marketing and shit. And then I've, and then my bliss or my fuck yes turned into like, oh, I don't want to do that. And yeah, so now I feel in a pretty good place with it where I'm like, if the vision comes, like the vision does come and it's like, yeah, that's like my balls are tingling, my balls, my heart. I'm like, oh, I feel expansive. I see who I want to be, who I could be, what I want to have and all that and do. And then for sure, like my mood will change at times, my feeling, depending on how tired I am. Have I eaten? Have I been, did I get 7 straight sales calls, in inverted commas, which I don't think of them like that anyway, and they all said no, it's like, yeah, that might fuck with my fuck yes. Yeah. But come back to okay, if I really sit, is this the thing? I'm like, oh yeah, it is. Yeah. So that's been helpful for me. Yeah. And I do think sometimes like people in the spiritual or the conscious community, I don't know, I feel like in ways there's even a privilege that we get to even consider. Oh, and do I believe that? I don't know if I believe that. I don't know. What am I thinking here? I'm thinking like I'm in a position where I can do like decide what I want to do and do anything, like because I work for myself. It's going relatively well. And then I'm like, well, that's good for me. But I'm like, well, hang on, I chose that, from the get-go. Yeah. But I'm just understanding that, yeah, there are people with various circumstances that potentially can't. But then I think to myself, well, okay, the single mom with 3 kids. I know people that are single mums with 3 kids and they fucking made it happen, So yeah, that feels like a useless tangent.
And for me, I've had this thought where it's like, oh, I like in a way I am privileged. I am to be sitting here having this conversation, be able to afford the time and energy to have built a business where I can work for myself. And I've spent the last 5 years making that happen. Yeah. And spent countless fucking hours doing that. So, yeah. And going through that resistance. So, yes, I'm privileged because I was able to create this opportunity. And I believe other people can also create their own privilege and opportunities for themselves. And if we stay in that, I can't do it, there is a victim mentality there where it will never allow that person. And that doesn't mean people can't start from a disadvantaged place. That is fucking true. Some people have it hard and they are disadvantaged beyond belief. And yet I still believe that they can make it happen and do something more if they choose. And if I keep them in the box by believing they can't, well, that's not fair on myself. And if I keep myself small because maybe I don't believe they can't, that's also not fair, because the more of us who do this, the more people believe that it's possible as well.
Yeah, I dig that, bro. The more of us that do this.
And like this for me, you touched on something before, and I think you would feel the same around surrender in the spiritual community. And like for me, I've probably ranted on this before because it's something that gets me every time people talk of surrender. And I think this is what you touched on about doing nothing and just sitting there and just flowing and following the bliss. There's like, I speak of surrender in my work. I speak of surrendering to what wants to move through us though. Like in this, my vision, I have to surrender to that, and I know it's going to destroy me. But that surrender doesn't mean I just sit and do nothing. It means I continuously show up and surrender to what's being asked of me. At times that is doing nothing, but it's surrendering to the life that wants to move. And I think this is an element you touched on, which I find so, so important.
Yeah, I like what you said, bro. That was sorry, I can't help. There's so many people podcasting. Like, I did a status today, and it said, Confucius says something like, just because there is a microphone and camera in his face does not mean he say good shit. You know, like some podcasts are just saying bullshit.
Yeah. And some of this, you know, people may think that too. And
that's why I just said it. I was like, man, I probably just said the most bullshit podcast bro thing.
And like, that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, people have the models of reality that we operate within. And
yeah. So anyway, surrender. Well, I learned from my friend Andrew Pierce, who he would be a great person to have on podcast. He does live in Bali though. I used to really think of surrender as a pretty passive thing. And he was like, nah, man, like surrender is active. And exactly what you said, like surrendering to the life force, to the calling. And I realized like my surrender, as I was calling it, was probably more just like checking out when things didn't potentially go my way, rather than, yeah, like, okay, surrender deeper to like, this is what's moving through me. And that fucking, of course, is going to involve taking action. Yeah, like sometimes it's going to be, okay, today's doing nothing. But yeah, the surrender is something that's actually trying to call us forward. Like, you know, here, take this step, take this step, take this step. So that's how I'm trying to do it.
And before this podcast started, and I'm probably going to use a word that isn't the best, but I called it feminine leadership.
Sure.
And that felt like, when you're speaking of that surrender pulling you forward, that feels like for me that intuition, maybe that's a better word, driving us forward and pulling us towards where we're meant to be in life. I might also call that soul. And I think a big part of your work is around that. And I'm curious, like, since you're a dance teacher and you're working with like men and women, and it's also like this more attuned leadership that you've become aware of in that, like, do you see similarities in that?
Similarities in my work and what, sorry?
Similarities in your work, and I'm having a mind blank, what you just said.
Around surrender.
Yeah, around surrender.
Yeah. Do I see similarities between... similarities in my work and surrender? I got to think about it.
That's good.
I think I can speak to it from the dance perspective. And I feel like what you've actually just said actually does give me cause to go away and think about it. And yeah, probably there is greater ways to bring, surrender to my own leading of myself and other people, I think, is what I'm just getting now. But from the dance perspective, so yeah, just for a little background for everybody listening, I'm a Latin dance instructor, and I use that as a vehicle for leadership, and for people understanding leadership, communication, trust, authenticity, safety, bad communication, because when you are dancing with somebody, like literally, you're connected, you're holding them in your arms or vice versa, everything is felt and it's instant. So because of that, we have this it's body-based, so we have this new physical, tangible experience. It's like you know when you have a stomach ache, it's like you're not really questioning it. You're like, yeah, I've got a fucking stomach ache. And so when you're dancing with somebody and they, take a step and it's kind of off time, both of you feel that. If they make a move and it's really abrupt, both of you feel that. And then that has an effect on the person being led, and then it has an effect on the shared dynamic. It's like, oh, that was really abrupt. So that the person being led, the follower, they might get tense, they might feel unsafe. And so now maybe they're not listening as deep the next time because they're actually, concerned for their safety. And so within that surrender, there is a surrender that occurs in dancing, is like, I'm actually first trying to empty myself. And I spoke to this at the training. I'm trying to empty myself to meet my partner first, because literally, like, so given that usually the man leads and the woman follows, I am the leader most times, but I want to listen first to her, because why would she let me lead her if she doesn't feel like I have listened to what is even possible for her? Am I dancing with a 20-year-old young woman who's a trained dancer? Am I dancing with a 50-year-old who has been doing this for, 12 weeks and it's really just some fun? Like, I'm not going to dance with those two people the same. So there is an emptying, there's a surrendering, there's a listening to both my partner and then to the music, because, that's what dancing is. It's movement, ideally, to the music. Otherwise, you're just doing stuff. So, yeah, there probably is. I don't know if I can make the direct link, but that's kind of what I've got. Yeah.
And could you give some more detail on what you mean by emptying yourself?
Yeah, I try to not think, basically, like literally, if my partner is in my arms, I'm feeling for how comfortable are they. Like, I can literally feel her body, okay, it's stiff, it's actually really relaxed. She's flexible. She is responsive to me. Do I just lean to my left a little bit and she comes with me, or not? So I empty and try not to think. I'm trying to feel where she's at and what's possible. And then I'm trying to let the music then come into my body. And so all of that is a feeling thing, because the more that I'm thinking, there's already, like, if we're talking about space, the space is occupied. And if it's occupied by thought, then it's not occupied by feeling energy. And that's where I believe we should dance from. So the analogy there is, directly to empty myself, surrender to soul, purpose, spirit, God, goddess, whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
So I'm not sure if you're familiar with the idea of hollow bone.
Yes.
Yeah, which is where my mind went when you said this, which is more in the facilitation space where you practice emptying yourself, letting anything move through your body so there's no attachment to it, and we can show up present in the moment, which it sounds like you've been able to mix them to, or bring that craft to dance as well, which is a really, really powerful and potent thing. And if you're listening, really if you're looking how to be present in a situation, the practice of hollow boning is one of the most beautiful things, where you do allow the space to be created and to be unlocked so you can show up present.
Mm.
So there's been something alive since you spoke it, and that was about what place you create from is what the energy maintains at. That wasn't an exact quote, but it was along them lines.
Sure.
And you spoke of the client of yours who created all the money and all of that from that place. And for me, I've had this conversation with other people where he's created all that money from that place of needing not to be rejected. And so how I view the world is that money has that energy stored within it because that's where it's been created from. And, you know, we could look at this in two different forms where perhaps, you know, to remove that energy, you would need to remove the money and then start again. But I don't believe that's the world we want to really operate in because, well, then what's the point of just destroying everything? And that's for me where alchemy comes in, the transmutation of energy. So in a situation like that where it's like, oh, we've created from a space where maybe it wasn't aligned with who we want to be now, and we no longer want that energy to be with us, how would we begin to transmute that? Is that possible to transmute that so no longer that energy is still with us?
Yeah. I actually got excited when you said, like, I imagined him giving away all his money. And yeah, that's one way to do it. But yeah, that's really comes down to who you're being, like, and you like, where are you relating to your money from? And that shifts simply. It can take time, but it's like the idea of the shift is simple. Really, just healing, you know, where you created that from. You know, you don't have to exit a relationship if you found out that you got into it because you were scared to be alone. You know, you don't have to. You can, but you don't have to. As you heal that part of you, you know, the part that's rejected, the part that feels alone, you will just simply relate more wholesomely to that thing. And my experience of it is like, it's like I'm pulling back lines or cords. You know, it's like, oh, that woman or, you know, my money no longer just kind of pulls me around and dictates how I feel. It's like, oh, I have the same money. I have the same partner next to me. But yeah, I feel cleaner about it. I don't feel shit without her or without, you know, millions of dollars. And I feel calmer. I feel more present. And of course we'll have a better relationship. Maybe I create more money, or maybe I create the same money with less time. Maybe I just don't worry about it. Maybe I just create the same money, but I'm not stressed about it 24/7, and my mind's not on it 24/7. Or maybe I'm with my partner and I just, you know, when she goes away for a weekend with the girls, you know, I'm not fretting. You know, I'm not paranoid, or, you know, if she doesn't text me back, I'm not. Yeah. So and that's just healing the emotional, energetic wounds.
Yeah. What I hear in that is basically so within, so without. So it always begins with the inner process, and, you know, the external thing, that is only one factor that we're considering. It's not the actual source of anything. It's just how it's showing up in our world. So in the case of money, if that relationship, oh, that's just a reflection of something deeper, something he's scared to lose, something he's scared of. So healing that allows more flow, allows more opportunity for something else to fill that space.
Yeah, what you said there, it's not the source of it. Yeah, that's big. I've been doing new work with a coach around our beingness, who I am being. And I'm realizing that I feel like the greatest power, at least to me right now, is to be able to choose who I am being in any given moment, no matter what happens. And this is I think this is a pretty common spiritual idea or philosophy, but I believe I've never really learned from anybody how to do it or be it until now. And I'm like, fuck, I can actually choose right now that I'm going to be somebody who's present. I'm going to be somebody who is grounded in love. I'm going to be somebody who wants the best for everybody. And again, I do think it's hard to, because so many people listening will be like, oh, I understand that. But right now I'm like, I'm actually getting it in my body and in, practice. And it's the fucking coolest thing, man. Like, and now, like, yes, I'm wanting to create various things in my business. I want to create this type of impact and this money, and I want a lifestyle like this. But yeah, like it all comes back to who I'm being and who do I want to be. And this has been a new distinction, is it's like, do I love who I'm being? Like, do I enjoy the experience of me? Do I enjoy the experience of being bitter and resentful at someone, even if I think that bitterness and that resent is justified? And maybe the answer is yes, and that's okay. Like, it actually can be yes. It's not, it's not a loaded question. But yeah, more times than not, I'm like, nah, it doesn't feel good inside me to experience myself as being bitter or resentful or insecure. And so I'm like, well, who would I love to be? And then I decide that and I choose that, and bro, it's just fucking cool, man. And that's why I was stoked to come here today, because I felt no need to prove anything, no need to try and sound smart. I want people listening to, I want it to be valuable. Like, I really wish, like, I think I do have good things to say personally. And I really wish, the people that read it on Facebook, if they just took it and did it and then came back and told me, oh yeah, like, I started journaling because you talked about how you journal. And it's, I've been doing it for, 2 weeks now, and it's really been significant for me. Thanks. Like, that would be massive for me, because I just, at its like the core for me with service and what I want to do, I just want to say and teach good shit and have people use it, have it affect their lives, and then just tell me, because I just want it to affect their lives. Yeah, anyway, so I came here today. I was really excited. I felt honored. It's like, yeah, it feels good. I'm just going to sit down and have a cool convo. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love so much of this, because for me it's been the biggest lesson. Like, I feel there's a degree of letting go of attachment to outcome in this, of being okay with either. Like, this conversation, I come here and I'm like, I feel these conversations are going to be great, and I'm excited, and I'm also like surrendered to whatever they will be, knowing whatever they need to be, they will be. And I'm not too attached to it, like, we need this and we need this, but there's an openness to what will be. Like, I'm still like, I want people who listen and to receive something. Like, that is a deep desire. If they don't, look, I'm sorry, but also, like, I had an epic time. And so, like, for me, it's that degree of openness, which is so important. And like, for me, I do a lot of Western esoteric practices, which is for me about the middle path. And in that, I see it as coming okay with both polarities. Like, we live in a dualistic universe where it's like, for money, money's come up a few times, can I be the same person in scarcity and in richness? Like, can I divide and come to a singularity within that where it doesn't affect who I am or how I'm showing up? Can I be okay in my relationship if, my partner's there or she's somewhere else, and just still feel solid and centered within myself? These ways of being are so powerful when we can actually come to being in that. And this is a great reminder for me to actually embody that. And I still feel, for me, it's like I get that, but I'm still getting that as well. Because when I hear that, it's for me, I got the vision of, the yogi sitting on the hill and we got all the students listening to him, and it's like, oh, yeah, I kind of get that, but also I'm not embodied in it fully yet. Because I know for me, there's still times where I get affected by what occurs, and I'm still learning, it doesn't matter if that occurs, I'll still be okay, and I can choose how I am and not to be distracted by what's past or what's in the future and come into that moment, which you just gave me a whole new perspective on past and future and uniting that polarity into the singularity of now.
Say more about that.
So, for me, what draws us out of the present moment is generally the past or the future.
Yeah.
And both sides of them are coming from a place of, I wish something else happened in the past, or I want this to occur in the future. I don't want this to occur in the future. So in that, there is a dualistic opening of, I had an expectation of what was to occur in the past, and I'm not okay with that. And I want something, or I don't want something to occur in the future. So there's an expectation or an idea of what should or shouldn't happen in either situation.
Yeah.
And like what this work for me is uniting that polarity and being okay with that shit happened, that shit might happen, that didn't happen, that won't happen, and becoming okay with all of them. And on a timeline scale, it feels like if we can do that, we can actually come into the now and be present.
All right. I like that. Yeah, that gave me something. And what you said, can I be the same person in scarcity and in, abundance or richness or wealth? Yeah, I was thinking about this the other day, because it does just drop in, deeper and deeper. And I was like, I saw some conditions by which I was like, oh yeah, I am attached to this external condition being true so that I can feel something on the inside. And I was like, when I saw it, I think it was around women, I'm not sure. And I was like, oh, it was another layer of the awareness. And then I just saw it in other places. And I was like, fuck, I don't need that anymore. I really felt like I let it go. And I was like, oh, I am curious to see who I'll be, in so-called scarcity and in so-called abundance. Yeah, can I be the same person? Who do I want to be? But yeah, just that needing of the conditions to be a certain way. And if the conditions aren't that way, then I don't feel that way. That's really powerless. Yeah. And it's kind of like a recipe for getting pulled around by life, so to speak, rather than groundedness. I feel I don't know. I'm just talking this out because it's dropping in layers, but yeah, I don't know. I hope that's. Well, I got something from that. I was about to say, hope someone gets something from that. I got something from that, bro.
I got something from that. Bro. I love when I can have the moments that, that feels profound right now in myself.
Yeah, someone else is like, what? Yeah,
and that is perfectly okay. And I'm curious, are you familiar with existential kink?
Not really.
There was a lot of what you were saying there that reminded me a little bit, not so much directly, but like my belief is we have desires and they'll be met consciously or unconsciously.
Right.
And the idea of existential kink is some of them desires aren't exactly what we'd label as good desires. So it's a desire for scarcity. It's a desire for pain, suffering, and that some part of our being, like on a soul level, wanted that experience to know what it was like in the evolution of ourselves. And one of the axioms is if you have it, you want it. And so anything that we are having, there's some part of ourselves that want it. And the practice within it is to embrace that having of it. So scarcity again, if it's like, oh, I'm like so contracted and closed around scarcity because I have no money, It's like, can I open to that and be like, oh, I'm getting something from having this experience of no money. I'm getting something from this experience of no money. And there's an attachment to that feeling. So on the unconscious, there's probably an existential kink says there's a pleasurable experience in the unconscious of that. So it might be like, oh, for me, I did these practices when I was going through a lot of scarcity myself. And a lot of it was like, oh, when I'm feeling scarcity, I am getting dominated by the universe. And I loved that. That was like my kink, that there was something to be dominated by, because that gave me sense of freedom. And like, you know, it's like BDSM where a person in submissive actually feels free. And I had a universal contract like that where I was like, oh, I'm getting dominated by the universe because I have no money. And so now I will stay in this. But it was that feeling I wanted that I hadn't realized of, oh, I enjoy this. There was a pleasure. There was an enticement and excitement in that. And until I felt that, until I allowed myself to feel that, I stayed in that situation.
Yeah, I feel like I have an existential kink that I've just realized. And part of it is like checking out. Yeah, like I have been viewing it as avoidance, like avoidance to doing certain things. But I'm very good at checking out. And like, you know, I'll put, you know, an NBA game on. I'll watch 2.5 hours NBA, and I'll eat a burger or ice cream with it, and then, you know, I'll have a nap or something like that. Like very indulgent, like over the top and I almost like, you know, when it becomes a little bit sickening in some ways. And I've graduated from that a little bit, but yeah, I can feel the part of me that's like, yeah, because I've been saying that I don't want that. I'm like, oh, I don't want to be so checked out. I'm like, man, part of me fucking enjoys being checked out, bro. I think I need to let that just run in my system a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe like if we resist anything, we are creating it. Like if I say I can't be poor, I will eventually create that. Like in some way, shape or form. Maybe it'll be like in a different way rather than money. But if I say I can't have that, there's an inner tension within myself. I can remember, for me, this was a journey with porn. So I've spoke of this on here before, where I went through a massive porn addiction. Went from like 14 to about 20. And then, you know, I said, no, I'm not doing that again. And I didn't touch it for many years. And so in that, I'd gone from one side of the polarity to the other. And then there was this internal tension that there was a rule that said I couldn't do this because this was bad. And in that, it made me conform to a way of being. After I left my recent relationship, I had a very indulgent night. It was a bit more hedonistic than yours. And, you know, I had Baileys, I watched porn and all of this. And the next morning I woke up so free. I was like, I feel fucking free because no longer did I have that internal tension. I woke up and I was like, oh, I did that. I don't feel judgment. I told myself it was okay. And I was like, do I want to do that? No. But I could choose to do it or not. And I think that's an important thing when we're having these. Like, I always want to have ultimate choice if I can do something, even if it's bad or, you know, hedonistic or indulgent. Like, I want to be someone who can choose to do it. But the choice, because I have choice, I can choose not to. But if I tell myself it's bad, I can never allow myself to fully let that go.
Yeah, I fuck with that. Yeah, I have a similar experience actually with something else, but I think I'll keep it to myself. Yeah.
That's your goal to keep?
Yeah, bro. Where else do you want to go right now?
Yeah, we're hitting on an hour, so I just want to see if there's like anything alive left for you right now, and anywhere you feel like this conversation needs to go, or are you feeling complete?
No, there's more here. Yeah, I do feel that. I feel like I'd love to just be asked some questions. Yeah, about my work or myself or something like that. Yeah, because I feel like we don't. I mean, not that we have to talk about me, but
we've jammed pretty hard on some other things.
Yeah, we've gone hard on some cool stuff.
Yeah, and that there's a big intention of this. So yeah, I would love to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah,
and bring it towards that a bit more. And this is called The Weird Way. And you said you got into dance around 20. And, you know, also in your work, from what I know of it, it's probably considered to be a little bit out there in some spaces. Maybe not, you know, depending on how you view it, depending on how you tell people what it is. But I'm curious what led you onto this path of like self-development, of going within, of meeting yourself in these levels.
Yeah. I just need to take a breath here. Well, yeah, it really was girls in high school, hey? I think that was the catalyst for me, bro. I used to view myself as not masculine enough. That was a big story that I had. And I was a good basketball player. I played at a pretty high level. And to get better at basketball, I started looking into visualization and stuff like that. You know, sports psychology. And then just had a realization that like, oh, this can be used for all of the things, you know, like psychology can be used for life. Surprise, surprise. So yeah, then I did start going down the path of understanding emotional healing and trauma and things like that. And that was pretty young. Like I started studying like high performance and visualization stuff when I was like 13 years old. And then by 20 I was coaching. So, you know, in that time period I was self-studying, self-teaching, and then eventually, you know, when I was early 20s, you know, I had a mentor, coach and things like that, and obviously, you know, plenty of those since. But yeah, that was really the catalyst. Was I thought I was not masculine enough and wanted to change that. Yeah. Well, the realization actually that hit me, I was playing downball. Do you remember the game downball or Foursquare?
Handball? Yeah,
like literally you just, there's 4 squares on the ground and you just hitting the tennis ball into someone else. That's it. I was playing that and I was just like, man, I created this cage. It's like I created the cage that I think I'm not masculine enough. And so if I've created the cage, I have the key. And I was like, fuck, you know, and that kicked off pretty hard.
So to have that self-awareness, because this was when you were quite young as well.
Yeah.
What brought that about? Because for me, even when I was 20, there wasn't this awareness of that. So I'm curious for you, what developed that?
Well, definitely go back to the nature-nurture conversation. And like I said, my mum would ask me really interesting questions when I was young. I just think I probably was born with a natural ability to introspect. And I do think she helped me cultivate that even deeper. And so that for me is kind of what nurturing someone's nature looks like. It's like, yeah, like the things that you're born with are heightened and become superpowers pretty early as well. So yeah, I think that curiosity and that ability to understand the inner world at a young age was due to that.
So I imagine from that point, like there was a journey around masculinity and being like, oh, learning that you are masculine enough, that you are like you can embrace that part of yourself. And I know for me on my journey, that was a big part of me getting into men's work was, I want to reconnect to my masculinity and feel like I can hold something, like I can in a way be powerful, but a different kind of powerful, not the traditional masculine, but a new way where I was connected to myself. So what was that journey like for you after going through that and wanting to like open that cage? Like you said, you had the key and what was that journey like?
Yeah, so I actually didn't think to myself, I'm masculine. Like as in like when I went through that journey, I didn't come to the place where I was like, yeah, I am masculine. I believe it. It was actually that I stopped thinking I wasn't masculine.
Mm.
Yeah, so which to me is a pretty important distinction. It no longer became something that I was worried about. I was not worried like, am I masculine? Am I feminine? How do other people view me? I was just like, I don't fucking know. You know?
You went back to that being.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Was that the question?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, man, I like that question.
Yeah, and I think that's a big journey that, can be put people in boxes where it's like, oh, I'm a man, I'm a masculine, I'm feminine, all of this, and like create that dichotomy of what we are when really what we want to be is I am. And for me, that is one of the most powerful statements as a man of like, I just am. Like, I don't need to be like, I'm a man who's big and strong. No, I'm fucking Dean.
Yeah. Yeah, actually. So just very recently, I'm reading this book called The Ultimate Coach, which is nothing to do with coaching. There's no strategy in it whatsoever. It's all around this being work. And I'm towards the end, and the book has started to talk about HSPs, which I said to Jacob before was not halal snack packs. Do you know what halal snack packs are? Or is that purely a Melbourne and where are you from?
I was born in Texas, Queensland. Small country in town.
Do we really have a place called Texas?
About 1,000 people.
Okay. So, it's just it's chips with lamb and chicken on top, and then like.
Yes, I know. I learned about them when I was in uni.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That makes sense. So halal snack packs. Anyway, so HSPs, highly sensitive people or persons, and as I'm learning, it's people's nervous systems and their brains actually process information differently. And this, from my understanding so far, it is different to being ADHD or neurodiverse or autistic. It's again different, but it feels like it falls in the same. Yeah. And so, the dude is high on the spectrum of HSP. And I realized that I am as well. I can't remember why I was. You saying I am Dean.
Mm.
Yeah, that's what led me to this. Like I'm really coming to grasp just how unique, like truly unique we all are. And I used to think that kind of on the personality level, or on the like, if everyone's their authentic self, we're all unique. And then I also thought about it, some people are just more in tune, some people are less in tune, but they're more, they might have the ox or the bull archetype where they're not as in tune, but they fucking get shit done.
Yeah.
Or, there's someone who is very air-based, they're super in tune and maybe not really able to get much done, I started to think about it on like the energy level, the spiritual level, but now I'm through this HSP stuff and myself apparently being so, I'm like, fuck, like there's not a single person alive who is the same. And that's just the most obvious statement. But again, like we speaking about before, getting stuff on different levels.
Yeah.
I'm getting that on different levels. I'm like, actually your brain processes shit differently, and that can give you superpowers, and it can cause also chaos for you. Like one of the things that apparently HSPs feel is like violence in movies is really hard for them to bear. And I've always wondered this about myself, because when I was younger, if I knew that there was going to be a gun fired in a movie, you don't even see the person die. There's just a scene, the gun's fired, and I wouldn't watch the movie because I knew that moment was coming in the movie. And especially being a man, I was like, what the fuck, you know, like, because I have no interest in UFC and shit like that, you know, and seeing, I have definitely like had judgment on myself around, okay, I don't really love that, but I will watch fantasy violence, you know, like I'm fine with Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter and stuff like that. So yeah, just coming back to, it's like, whoa, like every single person is so exceptionally unique. And yeah, I really just wish people would understand themselves some more. Give them the space to, like, yeah, come to understand some of the things that, you know, you and I know about, you know, whether it's human design or it's, you know, astrology or, you know, even if it's a more mainstream, you know, personality, Myers-Briggs or some shit like that, you know, because the last week understanding that about myself and honoring myself so much more, it is like I'm understanding my nature more, and I can, I can give to myself what I need to really, really, really thrive and enjoy my time here and be fulfilled. And I can give to myself what I need to ideally kind of not have a chaotic time, you know, like that's going to happen, and don't want to kind of deny anything, but to live in chaos, you know, fucking 24/7 is not a desire, you know? So yeah, man, it was very interesting to learn about HSPs and just you saying, I am Dean. I'm like, yeah.
Like there's so much here that excites me, inspires me. Like when you're saying that, I'm like, yeah, there's 8 billion people on this planet. No one is like you. No one is like me. Like I can grasp that, but not truly. Like that is such big perspective of like, no, there's no one here who can do what I can do or do what you can do. No one who can do what if you're listening do. Like that's unique, and that is one of the most beautiful gifts.
Yeah. And like to try to even just be in someone else's body is like, so like we can't, right? Well, I don't think we can. But for example, obviously like I said, I dance, and when we go out, it's darker. And often there are, you know, flashing lights and stuff like that. And my nervous system, like I lose my balance because of that. Because if it's too dark and there's too many bright, you know, maybe there's just a multicolored light that changes between, you know, that affects my nervous system massively. And obviously losing my balance when I'm dancing is not ideal, you know. But a lot of people don't even know that about me. It's like, shit, I don't even know that about, I'm certain other people are experiencing that as well, but they don't even know that. And there's so many ways in which I've judged myself. Sometimes it's the judgment of like, you know, that's, you're a pussy, you know, or you should like UFC, you know, like, or sometimes it's just been like, I don't like that about me, you know, that's annoying. It's annoying that I get dizzy. But like, what if I can come to understand myself just really, really well? And what if the same thing that causes me dizziness in that context causes like it's a beautiful gift to myself or somebody else, you know, in a different context.
Yeah.
And so that's cool. And I feel stronger, you know, this week I feel stronger as an advocate for like, fuck man, the world is really not set up that well for the range of people. No. You know, even talking about, I see shit on fucking Shaney's, you know, Shaney Marie.
Yes.
Dane Thomas, you know, I see those, both of them for whatever reason have posted about cow's milk this reason. And then I looked at the comments because I was like, oh, this is going to be wild. You know, like so many people like, oh, cow's milk is so terrible for you. Of course, there's the, you know, is it ethical? But, you know, there's all that shit. But like, fuck, my system is completely different from, like, not just a little bit, completely different from your system and the next person and the next person. Yeah.
Yeah, I love this because I feel this touches on so much of our earlier conversation of, we're coming to a place where we actually need to nurture our own nature. And that is a big thing where like the importance of knowing ourselves and adapting to who we are. Like for you, like going into the highly sensitive people and like, oh, they experience this and having that framework, that is powerful. And like for me, when I've discovered something about myself, there can be a sense of validation as well, where it's like, oh, that's okay. I can feel that. I can be with that, and that makes sense for where I am right now. And the more I learn about myself, the more I can provide for myself, and the more, like you're saying, we can live a life that feels more exciting, more enjoyable. We get to live more like prosperous in every sense of the word, and like that for me makes this knowledge invaluable. Like recently, I've been less able to have like any milk products, whether it be like alternative milks or anything like that, because my body's just not agreeing with it right now. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's a new experience, but I can learn that and I can adapt to that and change what I'm doing, because then that allows us to have a better perspective or a better way of life and being like, oh, I need this right now. And the more we do that, the more we live.
I dig it.
Yeah, man. I dig so much of this conversation.
Bro, I dig so much of this conversation. I think part of why I came in so open and I felt like nothing to prove is because of this being work that I'm doing. Like, well, I feel like even I tune into that. I'm like, what is the feeling of trying to prove? And as I feel that in my body, I'm like, oh, there's a strain. It's like energetically proving myself. It feels strenuous. Like I feel like I am being pulled. Like a rubber band. Yeah. This work around being is so cool. And as I tune into the subtleties, I'm like, oh man, I don't want to try to prove myself. I want to be present, like, because that feels good to be for me. And yes, I've had some cool successes lately, and I'm going to Europe next week, and then I'm going to America in a couple of months and shit like that. And so good things going on, but like those good things are the result of who I've been being, for myself, in my business, for other people, and stuff like that. Yeah, bro.
When I hear you speaking right now, it feels like you're becoming more and more attuned to the subtleties. And I see this when we're on the path of mastery. Like I see that for most people on this path, it's a mastery element we're really after. And mastery at the start, it can feel like, or like development can feel like big initiations where, our life drastically changes.
Yes.
and I've been dancing with this of like, oh, I used to seek like ego annihilation because I didn't like who I was and I wanted to change myself by destroying myself and rebuilding. And now it's like about honing myself. And I'm curious for you along the way, what have you noticed, like the difference of where you are now and like the path you've taken to get there, of like seeking different experiences?
Yeah. So I just want to tell a story. Yes. Speaking about ego annihilation, I'm typically like, I want to learn from the source. And when I find somebody or something that I trust, I'm like, you've got the goods, you're legit. I'll just go all in. Like I'm open. I'm like, teach me, and it is when I find people that I consider masters. And so when I went to the Amazon when I was 24 or so, and to do ayahuasca, and I was there for 12 days. I did 7 ceremonies in that time. And firstly, I only kind of recently, someone was like, that's a lot. Like some people do one ceremony and, they'll do one a year later, that's 7 ceremonies in 12 days. Yeah. And I had one night, bro, where I was like, because I'm sure you've
Yeah,
done. Yeah.
yeah.
So the way we did it was we would sit with the shaman and we would drink the ayahuasca and set an intention. My intention, bro, was heal my heart, deepen my intuition, purge my ego, and sharpen my mind. I gave the mother a big quadruple. Any one of those would have been huge. Heal my heart. That would have been a big night on ayahuasca.
Yeah.
Deepen my intuition. Same. Purge my ego. Afterwards, I was like, well, I don't think that's possible. Bro, I actually thought I was going to die. I was out in the bathrooms, and I don't know if you've heard this phrase, but over there they called it a platinum purge. When you shit and vomit at the same time. I thought I was going to. I was like, please don't let me platinum purge, bro. And I'm just going to keep telling the story because it's a fun one to relive. I was sitting on the toilet and I was waiting. I was gone, bro. Like, I started taking my clothes off because I was like, my clothes are constricting my energy and all this shit. And then the only reason, honestly, I thought I came back, I literally told them, I was like, I'm going to die. Like, cause we had, so there was shaman and then there was assistants, and they were Western people. And I was like, I'm going to die. Can you please get some towels and put them down so that when I hit the concrete, it's not hard, which is so stupid because I was going to die, right? Yeah. And the only reason I came back, I think, was because Seth, who was one of the Westerners, but he was really cool. He lived there 6 months of the year. The other 6 months, he was an emergency doctor in Houston. I was like, that's a cool person to me. Like, they go both ways, east-west. And he wasn't supposed to be there on that ceremony. And then I heard him singing. And I was like, it just brought me back. But that stuff's irrelevant. But like, just speaking about just going hard, like seeking big breakthroughs. I remember I used to do it with money, and I would make huge declarations of what I was going to achieve and shit. And I still think there's a place for it. But I think there's a level of like, it's not in tune. Well, often, going that big can miss the attunement to the body, especially. And the body is the subtle realm. Yeah. The body, if you say, if I say I love myself and I feel my body will tell me if that's true. If is there tension? Oh, fuck, maybe I don't love myself. Maybe I'm just saying a pretty feelingless affirmation that I don't yet believe, which is fine. I used to have those big, and now, I celebrate small things. I celebrate, I was feeling really reactive to that person's comment, and I decided I can leave that. Or I decided to pick up the phone and actually call them and say, hey, I'd love to just clear this up, or whatever it may be. But it is just subtler things that I'm feeling, but I know that they will be, by the time, it's like this, we talked about before, the seed that becomes the tree. Yeah. By the time that seed, that energetic seed, has been like watered and the sun hits it enough times, and I've been in that experience multiple times, and I'm being somebody new or expanded or more present or grounded or loving each time, by the time it's that seed is the tree, it's huge. And so for people listening, what I mean is, by the time that hits the level of behavior and reality, my physical reality, then it's a big difference. So it's much more subtle.
I feel this so deeply on the path of devotion, of mastery. Like, it's the 1% so often. Like, I've had these big experiences, and like I still seek them because I know at times they are needed for another layer, another deepening, and I still find value in them. But if I was to do them every day, my life would be chaos. If I wasn't to have time to integrate afterwards, so it'd just be chaos. And to give ourselves a space to be like, okay, what's the thing I can do today to make myself better? Like, what's the 1% today? And that's what I'm really hearing in this is like, as we adapt and as we evolve, it's less needed to be something big. And I see it in this work. Like, if I to heal trauma now within myself, like, or move through something, it's less of like a big breakthrough experience that's very dramatic, and it's more like, oh, wow, I see you, little buddy.
Yeah,
I got you now. I can open softly, and I don't need the jackhammer to break on through. I can just like soften into it.
Yeah,
and I think that's so important in this world and in this work to maybe let go of that need for more and soften into what is.
Oh, a few good ums in there, bro.
I think whoever listens to these podcasts have got used to my ums.
Yeah.
And if you're listening, tell us the favorite parts of the unconscious language we may not be aware of. I know I do a lot of ums, and there's probably a few others.
Yeah. I don't know what I do, bro. I'm breathing a lot. Bro, you got more juice? Where are we at? I know it's probably...
It's about time.
Right.
And I'm just, before I do that, I love to check in to see if there's any last pieces of aliveness that wants to be shared or wants to be brought into this space.
Yeah, good question. Pieces of aliveness. Well, after that last kind of segment, I was really just feeling like I really want to encourage people to, especially people that haven't started to do the work. It's so cool. Yeah, it's actually like, I love this shit.
Yeah.
And for some people it's scary, I know. But I do think that's quickly passes. Like, you know, I've had people ask, like, was there a moment in your life where, you know, you left a corporate job or some shit and you had this awakening or something, you know, and you started that work? And for me, honestly, no. Like, I really feel like I just kind of was born pretty well like I am. And that person is somebody that's always been introspective. And I've always known, if I go into this thing, I'll come out better. Whereas some, you know, I've got various friends that, you know, I'm like, that's the thing that's going on for you, you know, how much you're seeking that person's approval or you're worried about what they're thinking of you. It's very easy to shift. But, you know, and in conversations, it's like, it's a scary thing. I've got to go into my feelings and stuff like that. I've got to go into my emotions and the stuff that I don't like about myself. But yeah, again, my encouragement is just know that when you do, you will come out better. Like, I've never not gone into something, not gone into a dragon or some shadow and not come out 1 degree freer or more grounded. So yeah, I think that's one thing. I feel like there's something else. That's one thing is, yeah, just start to do something where you do think about who you're being and who you want to be. Like, do you like being anxious all the time? Do you like being caught up on money? Do you like being caught up on men or women, or, you know, or maybe you're checked out a lot, you know? I often think that people go up or down. You know, if groundedness is this level, anxiety is like up. You know, it's like the buzziness, the elevated energy, and then checking out is like your energy's even gone past groundedness. You're like aloof and just like, oh, what is life? You know, a bit stoner kind of energy. Yeah. So, you know, if there's things in your life that you want to change, understand that it's likely going to be a combo of the inner work and potential actual things on the outside. You know, maybe you got to assert boundaries better. Maybe you need to express yourself and maybe you want to dress differently, but all of that will start with the inner work, you know, when you connect to your worth and your bravery and your courage, or you start to heal things. So that's number one. Number two, I don't know what it is yet, bro. Let me take a moment. Yeah, I think number two is about our nature. Yeah, which kind of hooks into number one. It's like, yeah, really asking who are you? And I feel like I want to give something practical, right? Like I don't think I'm going to go do this actually. I love journaling. So I think something that people could take away is journal the things that they, like the things that they experience in themselves. Like, for example, like I said, you know, I experience violence is a hard thing for me to bear witness to. And just see if there's like some gold in that somewhere, you know, like is there a way that thing is both something that sometimes presents a disadvantage and other times presents as a superpower? But yeah, just like journaling, you know, a list of potentially who you most uniquely are, and let's bring some more ownership and some ownership to that. Yeah, I think that's cool, because honestly, I think most people feel very different to everybody else. So, which is a funny thing to walk around, all of us feeling different. I reckon that's probably pretty common. Is people like, I'm very different to everybody else. I'm going to guess there. Yeah, so like let's just honor the self more, and then create a world where we can do that, a practical world, you know, which is happening, you know, people working from home more, that's cool. 9 to 5, less becoming a thing. 3 day weekends, you know, shit like that, you know, like the actual working world, I think fucks with people a lot. The education system, I think, fucks with people a lot, you know, when we are so individual. Yeah, that's what I got, bro.
Thank you, man. I love that piece about honouring the differences. As I know, I've often viewed my differences as a drawback rather than a celebration. So I appreciate that. And yeah, if you're out there, listen and honour who you are, celebrate who you are, because no one in this world is you. And for myself, I want you as you are. I want you to be you, because I know that's what the world needs, and it would be beautiful to allow that. So, Kristian, if anyone wanted to find you, man, or connect or ask questions, where would be a good space?
Yeah, bro. So Facebook and Instagram. I'm certain you'll link that stuff to you.
Yeah, in the show notes.
Yeah, cool. So check out the show notes. But for right now, Kristian with a K, Kristian, Stephan Martin, Stephan Martin.
And is there anything you have coming up or anything that you want to share?
Good question again. Right now, what do I have? Well, when's this going to be published?
About 3 weeks.
Well, by the time this comes out, I will be in Europe. So, if you're in Europe, reach out to me. And if you wanna hang out or kick it, if there's interest, I'm considering doing some workshops over there. I'm teaching dancing over there, but I'm also considering doing, you know, some personal development, leadership, relationship type of stuff. But also just feel free to reach out. It's cool to meet people overseas who have listened to podcasts that I've been on or done courses or been clients. In terms of within Australia, there's nothing at the moment scheduled, but there will be stuff like the leadership workshop that you attended, which involves the dancing. There will be one of those probably towards the end of the year, start of next year. My actual work itself, coaching work, I take a consulting approach. I don't know if that's the word. Where I work with individuals, teams and organizations to be incredible leaders for themselves and for others. especially from the heart, from authenticity. And so within that, nothing is stock standard. You know, like right now, I don't have a course. I go through a pretty slow, thorough process to talk with somebody about, you know, where they're at, who they want to be, and then I create something unique for them. You know, I'm working with a school at the moment down in Melbourne, and I created 3 unique workshops which they're going to do. You know, I'm going over to Utah in November, and that'll be a two-day in-person leadership training, and then 6 months of group coaching follow-up. You know, so nothing is just here's the one thing that I do. And for people that are interested in working with me as a coach, then they can hit me up, because I do, for someone that is truly interested, I do offer a very long 90-minute to hour free call. And there is no obligation. There's truly no obligation that they will coach with me afterwards. It's first and foremost to offer them value. And then if there is alignment to work together, then we'll just see. So, yeah, you can hit me up for that.
Beautiful. Thank you, everyone. Hit up Kristian, check him out, stay connected with him. I'm sure if he's got anything else coming up, he will be posting that online, and you can reach out and ask any questions. If anyone wants to connect with me, find me at the Dean Bentley on Instagram or Dean Bentley on Facebook. Thank you all for listening to The Weird Way. Kristian, pleasure to have you here, man.
Thank you, brother. Bye.